Hello, good day, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever time zone you may be in, and happy new week. I'm Dave Russell, joined, as I usually am, by my colleague and friend Jason Buffington. And today we got a really fun topic for you. We've got a bit of a continuation, meaning last week, if you tuned in on Friday, our colleagues Rick Vanover, Melissa Palmer went through a number of interesting cloud scenarios as it relates to backup and recovery. We thought we would double down on that a little bit, Jason, kind of taking a different view on that. Loved what Rick and Melissa did. Definitely encourage everybody go out there and take a look at that live stream, which is still available. But we're going to talk about sort of things I would call a little more holistically versus specifically, at least to start. So, Jason, why don't you kind of take us through what we're going to look at, and then we'll introduce something kind of fun that we also started last week with a world map. But tell us about our topic, Jason.
Yeah, so this week we want to talk more around some of the operational considerations when you think about hybrid and multi-cloud, right? A lot of folks, the marketing jargon, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, the reality is we're talking about both. We're talking about how in the DPR research that we did, seems like forever ago, where the research published last day was like in February of the year. Research came out in June, but we asked over 1,500 enterprises, what were your major data protection and IT strategies? And one of the clear things that we saw was that there is an intentional deprecation of physical over the next 2 years. There's a slight deprecation in virtual over those next 2 years. And really the embracing of hybrid cloud and hyperscale cloud for hosting is going to be a bigger and bigger part of most IT organization strategies.
Perfect. And I did mention we're starting to do something kind of neat here. We've got a world map, a global map. So one already love this. People are already figuring it out. Christian, our great production assist, has already got the chat window going on this, but really encourage you wherever you're from. If you're from a certain state in the United States or you're from a certain country, just say hello from and state where you're at. Our goal, of course, is to try to beat our colleagues last Friday, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, our producer, they got 20, or did they get up to even 24, 24 different, 29? All right, we only got some work to do, Jason, but we can do this. Let's paint this whole globe green. Just drop in a chat, comment where you're from. I see Russia, India, Mexico, Brazil, Spain. Jason's in Texas. I'm in Colorado. Texas times 2, because our special guest that we'll bring in here in a little bit is also from Texas, just a different town in there. But also, in all seriousness, well, that's a fun thing that we've been doing. If you have any questions related to our topic here, please also do drop them in chat. I'll be monitoring that. You'll see me looking off to the side from every now and then. So if we can get to that live when we're streaming, we absolutely will. If not, we'll go and readdress it, after we go off air. But without further ado, Jason, next topic I kind of want to hit on really relates around disaster recovery as well as cloud as well. I mean, you've made a great point many, many moons ago. It feels like the cloud is not one thing. And by extension of that, the cloud and how you use it is not one thing. I mean, there's more than one use case, isn't there?
Yeah. So for some organizations, we talk about expanding the data center. You would presume that they're just going to start bolting on more cloud-based infrastructure compared with what they have been doing on-prem. But certainly for a lot of organizations, before they're willing to trust the cloud, some of the first scenarios that we often see alternative infrastructure for is disaster recovery. And then just like virtualization was 10 or 12 years ago, when they didn't trust running production in a VM, and then they failed over to it and they said, hey, this stuff runs pretty well in a VM. Do we have to go back? And the answer was no, you don't. And so we're seeing that same kind of shift right now, where organizations might be first leveraging IaaS-based hosting for disaster recovery, and then they're doing the testing and the viability for it, and they're realizing this stuff runs pretty well in a cloud. Do we have to go back? And so then the question becomes, no, you don't. And oh, by the way, the same mechanics that you use to fail over to a cloud or to rehost to a cloud can actually accelerate your migration. Now, what I think is really interesting, and Dave, I'd love to hear your view on this as well. We've heard a lot of stories over the last 5 or 6 months where IT pros have been saying, look, if my new digital transformation or IT modernization projects start with racking new gear in the data center,
Yeah.
that's a non-starter during a quarantine. Right. But if my new project could be done just as easily by adding a few extra Amazon credits or a few extra Azure credits and standing up virtual metal, all of a sudden that's become really compelling, because now I can modernize IT while I'm still wearing pajamas sitting on my couch because I couldn't go in the office yet. And so I think that's where we are right now. From an overall adoption perspective, is actually going faster, not slower. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I very much agree. And, I had a nice opportunity to, well, actually two great opportunities. One was to be in a CIO panel where many of them said, these world events, that we're trying to make, lemonade out of lemons, meaning to find a bright spot in a not so great situation. But part of that is we're going harder, faster on new capabilities, new projects. And by harder, faster, they were talking about accelerating initiatives, in some cases by up to half a year, 2 entire calendar quarters. And I think for some organizations, that will be the new normal. The idea of pushing ahead further, faster, to try to not only keep the operations up and going, but to see what they can do to get into more of a growth mode. With that, I want to bring in our special guest, our colleague David Hill on the product strategy team. David, hello and welcome to the live stream.
Hello, thank you. And don't let my accent fool you. I am fully Texan now after spending the weekend riding around on dirt bikes.
And yeah, you've got the truck, you've got the boat, you've got the dirt bikes. So that makes you a dual citizen right there.
And you do have the right political views. I've checked those on your social media page. You just talk a little funny for a Texan.
I'm not getting involved in politics.
Yeah. Well. So David, we're talking about adoption to hybrid and embracing hyperscales. This is an area that you've spent a lot of time in. One of the concerns I've always had around adoption of hyperscale is that some of the core expectations that you have in IT are things like role-based access, backup, security and controls. I mean, those kind of things. And often when organizations go from their legacy platform or infrastructure to this new platform, they forget how important those foundational IT requirements like backup are. And this is an area that you've spent a lot of time in over the last 2 years, isn't it?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in this over pretty much the past 10 years. And back like when I used to work for VMware back a long time ago now. And it's interesting because the aspects of the adoption has changed, and it's mainly around those key areas that you were talking about there, and things like role-based access control. Back 7-8 years ago, you had keys to log in with, and just access keys. People accidentally saved them in Notepad and they got left around, and then guess what? It's not very secure anymore. It's a bit like my dad writing his passwords for everything that he has in an Excel spreadsheet. Please don't do that. Whereas now, if you look like, even especially as you say, like the past 2 years, the technologies in the cloud have fundamentally advanced. So being able to build out security requirements and role-based access control and stuff like that in the cloud is critical to making sure that businesses can adopt this. And you're seeing it with the implementation in like AWS with like their integrated access management roles and capabilities like that. So it's really changing it.
You could almost say that when these foundational services and expectations are starting to come to fruition, it's almost a validation that this platform is ready for mainstream, right? When the platform first comes out, you're just trying to make sure that it works for you. But when mainstream adopters start looking at this, it has to be backupable, right? It has to be secureable. And so I think it's a validation that that cloud-based infrastructure really is mainstream suitable. Hey, can we, before we kind of dig in on that a little bit, can we look at the map? Can we see where folks are piling in?
Oh, we've got a lot of Europe, don't we? Ireland, Romania, got California, Poland, Ecuador, New Zealand, England, Germany. I think this might be our first New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken. That's us.
All right. Kiwis in the house. Cool.
Pressure's on for Australia then, right?
Well, Kiwis typically lead the way. So anyway, All right, so let's kind of dig into that a little bit. So now we've got it's a mainstream technology that typically requires a third-party ecosystem value around that. It means wow, can we speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, David, your thoughts on this, to Jason's point, if something really goes beyond, say, test and dev, or becomes, something that's going to be production versus, or maybe a better way to say is front office versus back office. That was once a kind of a VMware conversation. First you virtualize back office, non-customer facing solutions. I think certainly no one would argue that we're not beyond that now in the cloud, but in terms of what that means, it seems like not that long ago, the cloud for many of us, while production was kind of more niche, meaning only certain applications, not necessarily something that you might consider for the majority of your workload. Curious from a protection perspective, are you seeing that as well? Meaning, are we moving beyond just protect development activity to something that would be customer facing, even revenue generating?
Yeah, it's certainly when you look at it from the ability to build out these services and capabilities in the actual cloud is really helping people to do this digital transformation that we always talk about. And you see from these technologies that you can not only leverage the cloud from a scalability perspective, but that kind of old cliche about time to market as well, and how we can actually get those resources spun up so much quicker without having to go through those traditional IT processes. When you think about where it came from and the ability to just put in your Amex card and just spin up these resources, was how AWS grew from just a small niche player to what it is today. And I think looking at that, what really changed that was that developer focus of, well, we raise a ticket and it takes 2 weeks for IT to go spin up a VM, when a developer can go, oh, look, here's this little public cloud. I'll just pop it on my Amex card and my boss will approve my expense at the end of the month. Yeah. But when you think about it as well, it was all about, like, I think the change has been just in technology in general, like your iPhone, the fact that you can just go on the App Store and pull a new app down instantly and you get it. People want that in IT as well now, whereas before it was, I'll wait 2 weeks for project to get deployed.
So let's talk now some specifics. I think we've, talked at the industry overall. If we go to a slide, if we ask our producer Mark to bring up maybe the last slide in our deck, kind of some specifics. Walk us through this, David. Paint us a picture about what Veeam has done recently and how there are different ways we can implement, in this case, protection, but there's even more than protection when we bring in things like portability. Decompose this for us, if you would.
Yeah, so Veeam's really put a lot of focus into protecting cloud workloads. And when we look at this slide, kind of what we're seeing here is back in December 2019, it feels like a decade ago now, with 2020 being the way it is, we launched Veeam Backup for AWS, which is our native AWS cloud backup product. And then recently in March, we launched Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure as well. So what these two products are standalone is backup capabilities to go and protect your workloads that are running natively either in AWS or Azure. Now, Jason mentioned at the beginning, when you look at this multi-cloud world that we live in today, it's not just, oh, I have workloads in AWS, I have workloads in Azure, I have workloads on vSphere. People are actually moving and migrating workloads around between the different platforms because they need workloads closer to the services that they have maybe running in AWS, something like RDS, or Azure, where they've got SQL as a service. So Veeam have built in to not only have these standalone products, but also to be able to manage these products from within Veeam Backup and Replication. So when we talk about platforms, Veeam has built this cloud native platform now that allows you to back up and protect your workloads regardless of where they are. And we have things like integration into Veeam backup and replication. But we recently released Veeam backup and replication version 10a. And what this actually brings is native AWS backup into Veeam backup and replication. So any customer who has Veeam backup and replication currently deployed in their on-premises data center can now just install the 10a update with a little plugin, and then they can just go and actually add in their AWS credentials and manage their backup jobs like vSphere, Nutanix, physical workloads, and also go and now protect their AWS workloads alongside all those. So when we talk about this kind of euphoric single pane of glass that everyone always throws around about, this is where we need to get to, this is Veeam bringing in that single pane of glass. You have one product that is a platform that scales and spans across all these different infrastructure platforms, and that you can leverage to go and protect your workloads. And for me, it's a big game changer, because you don't have to keep, right, okay, I've got this product out in AWS, I'll go manage my backups there. Or I've got vSphere over here, I'll go manage my backups here. You create your backup platform with your repositories, and then you go and protect your workloads.
And Jason, I think David said something really interesting there we should double click on. I want to ask your thoughts. He essentially said, with 10a now, Veeam Backup and Replication, or VBR as we sometimes shorten it, has the ability to have plugin-like services, meaning we can deliver integrations and protections outside of even releases, somewhat analogous to what Veeam did a number of years ago with what we call universal storage APIs, where we could have one release of Veeam and underneath drop in support for various backup repositories or destinations, different devices. This is taking kind of the higher level view of that from workloads, isn't it?
It is. In my mind, and I hope someone on Twitter catches this, 10a is arguably the single most strategic release that Veeam has delivered since we first started deciding to back up VMs. And let me tell you why. I'm going to riff on what Dave said. If we go back to that solution diagram that we were just looking at for a second ago, if you look at Veeam's history, we first courted the virtualization admin and understood that the vAdmin needed different things and different mechanisms than what the rest of the data center needed. And if you look at that left-hand side, David, I have to admit, I'm a little envious of you, because you have been living in a how to back up hyperscale for the last couple of years. And if all you cared about was, if you're an IaaS admin, an Azure admin, an AWS admin, you could live and breathe in that left-hand side and be perfectly delighted, right? And what that right-hand side shows is for those folks that just want to focus on one workload, and that is your entire world, we have an answer for you. We've been developing that on the left. For those that want to have that single pane of glass, and we can go back to the face now, but if you want that, that single pane of glass is kind of that top, and you have a ubiquitous storage layer where all backups look like other backups. So now you have data portability. It's kind of like you got a hamburger bun, right? And some of us might like meat, some of us might like chicken, or what's that other thing that pretends to be protein that I forget. But anyway, but whatever it is, common pane of glass, common storage layer underneath, and really it's only that middle layer that has to change. I am so excited because it shows that we can address new workloads and cultivate them and mature them and then bring them into the main line. And that tells the story of what Veeam is looking at next. Super, super important for our strategy.
Yeah, and I'd say as well, when you're looking at that diagram, it's not only I'm protecting AWS workloads, or I'm protecting Azure workloads or on-prem workloads. You can take these workloads from any location and go and restore them to another location. So you can see, as an example here, we can go protect some AWS workloads and we can go restore them to Microsoft Azure. Or we can do things like instant VM recovery of our AWS workloads to vSphere. So we can have these workloads up and running on-prem in seconds. So it's not just I have these workloads and I can manage them from a single pane of glass. It's true mobility of these workloads, being able to move them, restore them wherever we need, and essentially migrate them maybe closer to different services, as I mentioned earlier.
That's brilliant, Dave, because we did have a question come in from Ian who asked essentially what you just addressed. What about the other way around? Can AWS instance pull from on-prem? And your point is absolutely, there is fluidity, both in terms of where something originates, but also where something can land. And I think as if we bring this full circle, meaning digital transformation conversations and kind of future-proofing yourself, that's the reason for data portability and cloud mobility is today we've made a decision, and tomorrow or a year from now or multiple years from now, that decision may change based upon a number of different variables, right? So we want to be able to have that fluidity. Quick shout out to the map, because we just got a number of other countries join us. Sweden, Georgia, Jordan, if I'm not mistaken, first time I remember, not just on the map, but in comment, hearing from Jordan. So thank you so much for that. Another person from Austin, Texas. That's fantastic. While we're on new technologies, guys, let's bring in one that we just started the other week, which was a QR code related to some research that we've got. And so what we want to do is highlight a QR code for a report called the 2020 CIO Cloud Data Management Initiatives. This is a report from Frost & Sullivan on cloud computing. And there's kind of a teaser. I scanned this report not too long ago myself. And one of the things that struck me, guys, was Karen Price, the author, says 52% of IT leaders cited migrating applications or data to the cloud is a key challenge that hinders, right, puts them at risk of being able to deliver their IT initiatives. Everything that we've just been talking about for the last 23 minutes has been about reducing the friction, reducing the barriers, reducing the things that might inhibit you from achieving your application desires, your data portability, mobility issues. So if we can throw, yes, we see in the QR code there in the corner, we'll leave that up for just a little bit. That'll take you to a download where you can download this research, a number of interesting findings in there. But now, as we sort of begin to wind down, just want to bring it back for a few sort of last words and thoughts as it relates to overall cloud activity and what we've done in 10A. We maybe should bring up a slide, and David, Jason, walk us through some 10A highlights. I've got a couple. Why don't we each pick a few? Since you're our guest, David, let's hit you first. Probably can guess where you might focus, but what was one of the more exciting things in this 10A release for you?
I would say my two most exciting parts of this is the first one is the Veeam Universal Licensing. I absolutely love this because it just simplifies everything that you want to do as a backup administrator. Because you go and you buy some universal licenses, and then it doesn't matter what you want to back up or where it is, you're just licensed for it. When you look at some other backup vendors, it gets quite challenging with licensing. You get charged for data coming in and out, what you're backing up, where's it going to, there's more charges. With Veeam, you just pay this one license, and then you just go and back up any workload, whether it's a physical Windows, a Linux machine, a vSphere VM, an AWS instance, an Azure VM, and then you can just move them wherever you want. And I think that, for me, is one of the most powerful aspects of the Veeam platform, is just bringing that simplicity to not only the platform, but also just to licensing, because nobody likes licensing.
Yeah, amen to that. Jason, how about yourself? What are some of the highlights for you? You made a bold claim on 10A and with this pluggable capability, but what would be standouts from your perspective?
Well, so certainly with 10A, we always get broader platform support, so making sure that we're always up to date on the hypervisor platforms as well. But to me, I guess the biggest single thing that resonates for me in 10A is we've said as one of our core tenets in Veeam is always around flexibility. There's a lot in 2020 which is chaotic, that is out of control between the pandemic and just IT budgets in general. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just in a state of upheaval. And between what we've done with platform services so that you can move workloads, what we've done, as David mentioned, with licensing, so that moves back around, I just love the fact that we've enabled a level of flexibility in data protection that I've never seen before. Whatever platforms you want to use, modern or legacy, whatever your licensing is preserved, the storage layer is preserved. Now we have a common instrumentation layer on the top. The world needs more flexibility and grace right now. And I think 10A enables some flexibility and stability in a world that's otherwise very chaotic right now. So I love what this lets folks do from an adaptability perspective.
Yeah, well said. And if I had to pick a couple, I'm gonna pick maybe a little bit of a niche one, but just because I think it's interesting, and then I'll pick a more general case one. The niche one is what we've done with Snowball support and our cloud tier capabilities. I think that's really very interesting in enabling organizations to rapidly populate cloud instances. Not that there's anything wrong with going over the wire, but there's some cases when there might be a desire to get there sooner, to really fully commit to being able to embark on this kind of strategy. I also want to give a shout out before I give to my second one. I want to give a shout out Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Our product strategy live team with our very own guest, David Hill, right here, will be on Twitter with the rest of our colleagues from product strategy team. And then coming up on Friday, on the same kind of time that we're operating on right now, we're going to have Veeam's Gil Lowe and Bill Bergman talking about really backup as a service, disaster recovery as a service, meaning, guys, I've seen a lot of customers and data centers now interested in a service model as they look to potentially cover other workloads. Like it could be all these, remote employees work from home. Maybe now you want to protect those. And so as a backup service provider could be helpful. So you can, on Friday, learn how Veeam leverages our enormous channel partner ecosystem to bring success around making sure multiple workloads are protected. Now, that aside, do want to mention the second one. Guys, I really like the speed of what we've introduced in 10A. There are some, I'll just call it dramatic performance enhancements. Don't take my word for it. Our colleague Michael Cade posted on Twitter kind of a before and after of being able to show really both sides of the equation, I mean, both backup and restore speeds. Rick Vanover likes to always say something like, Veeam is difficult to use, said no one ever. I would say, well, backup speed and restore speed improvements are something I'm not interested in, said no one ever, right? No one is looking to wait longer to get their data back and available or to reuse it, right? To leverage that for other use cases. So with that, let's give one more shout out to our map here. I think if I'm correct, we're up to at least 18 countries, 2 Canadian provinces, 8 United States, and we just added Jamaica, which is very neat. Awesome. I think that's the first time, Jason, we may have had someone from Jamaica, so very cool on that. So fantastic. Thank you, David, for joining us. Look forward to you and the product strategy team on Thursday. Look forward to Gil and Bill talking about essentially backup as a service, DR as a service. We got Russia in today for the first time. I'm just being told that's fantastic. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Stay safe, stay positive, and we look forward to see you on the next stream. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.